In this series, both Britpop Memories and myself will be investigating the Britpop archives. Each episode, we will take a deep dive into a 90s band and discuss the evidence from our sources to hopefully find the answer. Strap yourselves in because it's going to be a bumpy ride. Welcome to Were They BRITPOP?
Hi everyone and welcome to this new series. I have the pleasure of welcoming James from Britpop Memories off Twitter onto this series. Me, the legend himself, is here to help me debate everything that everyone's got to say in this new series that we are entitling Were They Britpop? And me and James are going to look through several bands and discuss the age-old question of were they Britpop or were they not Britpop? And we're going to look at people's comments and discuss things in every episode. And at the end of every episode, I've got a random selective wheel that I'm going to spin and we're going to see which band's going to come up next. Now, for this first video, me and James are just going to discuss the timeline that we're going to look at, because we can't look at the whole 90s as a whole thing. It'd just go on forever and ever. But we're going to discuss we're going to have a start point and a finish point, and any band that had an album or a single within that time period, we'll hopefully have a look at them and see were they Britpop. So, James, are you all right? Welcome to the channel.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, good to be here. So have you got an idea of a starting time?
Yeah, I think the starting time, it should start with Blur with Pop Scene in 1992. That's a definite change in direction of when indie music was sort of changing. It was come out the baggy Manchester scene, and definitely that guitar sound was being driven forward then, and that was the way forward, I feel, for British music then.
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue against Pop Scene being the start. It comes out in the end of March 1992. I guess you could argue a little bit, is Pop Scene, and then you've got the Drowners as well by Suede. Both of those two really, I mean, they come out within a couple of months of each other. So somewhere between the end of March and middle of May 1992, yeah, something definitely has obviously occurred and is starting. I mean, I've had a quick look at the numbers, and Pop Scene gets to number 32 in the chart when it's released in March 92. Drowners doesn't do quite so well. They get to 49. So I guess Suede are a new band, haven't got much history, haven't got a huge amount of following at that point. Blur had obviously been around the block a bit with Leisure, etc., and have come back. I guess the other comment I would say about Pop Scene is that you then have quite a gap between Pop Scene and Blur's next single, which is For Tomorrow, which then doesn't come out until about, nearly a year later, possibly every year later, actually, in April 93. So for Blur, it's a bit of a false start, I think. But I think, the impact it has on the British music scene, I think we have to go with Pop Scene, though, as the starting gun.
Yeah, I feel, and that is a big gap from the singles from Blur. And it's right what you're saying about Suede. Lots of comments about Suede were put up on Twitter, but not so much about Blur. Blur seems to have been overshadowed a bit. And I just want to go through one here. I've got one person wrote that it started when the first Suede album entered the charts at number 1, because it was the first moment that what had previously been an alternative scene truly went mainstream. Yeah, I can see a little bit of that, but I don't think it overshadows what Pop Scene smashed into the charts with.
Yeah, obviously the Suede album is a major moment, but you don't get to the album, do you, without having the first single?
No, you don't know.
Right, and yeah, I'd say Pop Scene is just snuck in before the Drowners, but I say it's about a 2-month gap, really. It's really not much. It's probably less than that. It's probably only like 6 weeks or something. So that 6 weeks there in early '92 is definitely the crux. I think the birthplace.
Yeah. Now we've talked about Blur and pop scene, but what do you think of the sort of Blur? When people think of the start of Britpop, they often think of Brett Anderson on the covers of the Select magazine and the Melody Maker magazine, and there was a few shout outs for them two magazines, the Melody Maker one of April 25th, 92, and then the Select one where a year later with the Yanks Go Home title on it. That's putting Suede in the spotlight again when Blur had sort of calmed down again. But like you said, Suede were on a sort of an upswing then, that new band coming in, getting all the popularity.
Yeah, obviously, yeah, Suede are the exciting new band, aren't they? And they really are pretty much the figurehead for the new, what will be called Britpop. Certainly, I don't know if you've read the books by James Savage, who was the manager. Well, sorry, that's not true. Sorry, the PR for Suede. But yeah, they really pushed Suede hard. They got Suede into the magazines, into the papers. I mean, Melody Maker had Suede on the cover, and they haven't even had a song out. Yeah, nobody knew who they were. They're suddenly on the front of one of the biggest, or probably just about the biggest weekly paper in the country. So that's quite incredible. And I guess if Polly's looking at this on Polly Birkbeck, she'll probably be able to comment on it, because of course she was working for Savage and Best, working in that PR team, and it was people like her that really sort of pushed Suede really hard. And I think that amount of push is probably really important in the birth of Britpop. You know, if they hadn't gone in so hard on Suede, you know, what would have happened? You know, Oasis would have probably come along at some point, you know, in 1993, 94. But would you have had that 1992 moment of Suede really kicking the doors open? I don't know. That's hard to say. Interesting you mentioned, by the way, sorry, you mentioned about the Select magazine, because I just had a quick trip to the loft before we start. And there it is.
Yeah, there it is.
Copy of the original, Select. So that's April 1993 with the legendary Yanks Go Home, with the article written by Stuart McConey regarding Suede, and it's quite a big feature. It's there's a lot in there, and that's often credited as the sort of the article that sort of coins the phrase Britpop.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, if you read that magazine, and I've read it a few times, I can't actually see the word Britpop in it. People are convinced that it's in it. I can't see it, but maybe I'm just not reading it hard enough. I don't know. So that's an interesting side note. But also, John Robb, who's the guy who writes for Louder Than War. I think he will claim he coined the phrase Britpop even earlier than that. You know, possibly early 90s, even late 80s. I think he starts to claim that he was using this word Britpop to describe British pop music, because that's all the word means technically, doesn't it? Really, I mean, we can be funny about our exact definition of what Britpop is, but it's an amalgamation of British pop. That's all it really is, isn't it? So yeah, but like I say, yeah, so it's really the Savage and Best PR team that can probably almost claim that they start Britpop in that way.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we had that discussion, and I'm pleased to see that you've brought that magazine up, because that's a bit of a white whale of mine. I don't have that magazine yet. I've not read it, so it's always
They occasionally
out my price range.
Appear on eBay, so you have to keep your nose in eBay, and just once in a blue moon, someone will be selling one. So keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah. Last time I saw one, it went up in the 30 to 40 mark, and I thought, even I'm not willing to go that on price for it.
I've got mine for about 14 quid or something, which is stupid money for a magazine that cost £1.75 when it was released. But, yeah, there you go. That's inflation.
Yeah. Well, one day.
One day.
Right. So I just want to, before we just go to the end, I just want to hit you with a few things before that maybe it was a bit too early. So like people threw in the Lars, which I thought was way too early, and I can see why, but yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people will say that There She Goes is like the proto-Britpop song, and it's very hard to argue against that, because if the Lars had come along in 1994, let's say, and been a new band then and released it, it would have been massive. I mean, it's a big enough song as it is anyway, but it would have been absolutely huge. Yeah, it is almost a blueprint, isn't it, for a certain type of Britpop, so that sort of jingle jangle sound that you hear so often, and that sort of that it's hard to describe, isn't it? It's not the Suede pulp side of Britpop, is it? It's more the past, Oasis, Real People sort of side of Britpop. It's definitely a blueprint for a fair old chunk of the movement.
Yeah, if that song, like I said, had come out before, say that one by the Lars, and say it was a Cast song, I think it'd probably put Cast on the map, and they'd have been huge, bigger than there was. But
yeah.
So we're going to go with Blur Pop Scene as the start. What do you think we should go for as the end then, James? What do you cite as the ending point?
Well, I mean, I get asked this quite a bit, actually. In fairness, this is one of the things that comes up quite regularly on Twitter. In fact, this one comes up more regularly than what starts Britpop, because I think everyone sort of agrees roughly that it's going to be Pop Scene, or the Drowners and around there, etc. The end of Britpop is a much more contentious area, much more debate about that. And quite a long time ago, I sort of sat down and I thought to myself, right, I need an end point, really. And I decided that I would go with the single Party Hard by Pulp. Now, Party Hard by Pulp is the final single from This Is Hardcore album. So it's the end of the This Is Hardcore album cycle. So a lot of people will say that This Is Hardcore is pretty much the album that closes Britpop, because it's pretty dark. It's certainly not a Britpop sound. It's certainly not a cheerful, happy-go-lucky, let's all go down the pub and have a pint type of an album. It's a much darker album. It's a massive move on from albums like Different Class and His and Hers, etc. So people will say This Is Hardcore is the final album. This Is Hardcore comes out in April '98, and Party Hard comes out early September '98. So I would say early September '98 is probably the point at which you can, say that's where it stops.
That's it. And I can see your point with that, because like I say, it's a dark song. It's not the happiest of songs at all, and that sort of leads in sort of what follows with Travis and Coldplay. They're not happy album. They don't release happy albums after the song Slow Dreary, and it sort of leads into that new sort of guitar music that followed at the end of the 90s.
98's got some interesting. There's 3 albums that come out, quite quick succession, actually. So you've got Pulp's This Is Hardcore comes out in April '98, and let's say the final single Party Hard is September. On the same day as Party Hard comes out, you have the album 6 by Manson comes out. Now, 6 by Manson is a very strange album. I don't know if you own it. It's like it's hard to describe. It's like a progressive rock sort of an album. It's a concept album. It really lacks. I mean, there aren't many singles on it. There aren't many sort of standalone songs that you could just sort of play on the radio, for instance. it's a very, very different album to Attack of the Grey Lantern, and it's very like a prog, concept album. So This Is Hardcore is the dark album. Six by Manson is a sort of a proggy, concept rock thing. And also that year in September as well, you get the Manics do This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours, which I always think is very commercial. It's very radio friendly. Everything Must Go. The previous album had been pretty radio friendly. The first album after Richie had left the band under unfortunate circumstances. But yeah, This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours is a very, very much a big shift for the band. And in fact, when you look at the front cover, they're all wearing like beige cargo trousers, and it looks weird. It looks almost like a boy band. So
I've got it here.
Yeah. I should have dragged my copy out actually, but yeah. So again, that's September as well. So in September 19th, you've got all sorts of different albums and singles, really sort of taking a huge leap away from that sort of classic mid-90s Britpop. The sort of lads down the pub, Blur, knees up mother's brown side sort of thing. So I think, so I would say, I'd say September 98, and it's really pretty much it's gone. That's not to say, that's not to say there isn't stuff after that, of course. 1999 is going to give you 13 by Blur. Hula Shaker is still going strong. Hula Shaker come back in 1999. They've put one album out, and then their second album cycle comes out in 1999. And you get singles like Mystical Machine Gun, Shower Your Love, and they're certainly a Britpop band, and there's no argument that Hula Shaker aren't part of Britpop. And it just took too long to get that second album out. Really, if they brought it out about a year earlier, it would have been a big part of the sort of end stage of Britpop.
Yeah, and that thing with Cool Shaker, that seemed to be a common theme. We might get into this on later on down the line with other bands and things. It took so long for some bands to get albums to come out that they just came out too late and sort of missed the boat or whatever, and just didn't happen. Yeah,
I saw someone, I can't remember the name, so I apologise, I can't directly quote them, but I saw someone saying on Twitter a couple of days ago about the fact that a lot of Britpop bands couldn't get to the third album, or the third album really was a weaker effort. I think your bulk of your Britpop bands probably had two good albums in them, and the third is probably pushing their luck a little bit. I won't name any particularly because it'd be rude to do that, but there's certainly some pretty weaker third album efforts. Although, of course, Oasis, their third album is the monumental Be Here Now, which is an absolute wall of sound and quite an incredible piece of work. Although it gets a bit of a rough treatment from a lot of people, but I think it's a great album. It's just completely bonkers. It's been written and recorded while they're all out of their trees on cocaine, living in Mustique or whatever they were doing. It's completely bonkers, but fantastic third album.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it was all high as kites, and Johnny Depp was playing the guitar for him.
Exactly. That's what they did. They're partying with Johnny Depp and Kate Moss in Mustique. I think that's why Noel, he spent a lot of that summer over in Mustique with those guys, and God knows what he was getting up to. It's best not to ask, but being a rock and roll star, I guess. And it goes totally over the top. It's completely mad, but brilliant for it.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to fire a few things of what people have posted online. So the first one, speaking of Noel Gallagher, one person put it was when Noel Gallagher was invited to number 10 Downing Street, and they put in brackets, when the outsiders were being invited into the very heart of the establishment.
Yeah, that's often comes up as being one of those moments, doesn't it? there's a Vanity Fair cover as well, I think, around that time, where Liam and Patsy are in a Union Jack bed, and
yes,
Liam
I know which one you mean. Yeah,
woolly hat or something, and and that's once you're on the front of Vanity Fair with a Union Jack, and Vanity Fair in New York are getting involved, you sort of know that that the fun's over. Really, it's gone. It's too far. It's jumped the shark, as they say. So yeah, I think the moment Noel Gallagher gets photographed with Tony Blair it's difficult, isn't it? Because rock and roll stars shouldn't be hanging around with.
No, the shot. It's like
there's an interesting story about that, because there's a couple of things actually to do with that. So you've obviously got Tony Blair has this big party at Downing Street and invites all the fashion designers and the actors and the musicians, etc. But they tried to get Damon involved. And Damon was having none of it. He smelt the rat. He knew that this was all a bit dodgy. And I'm sure this is all talked about in John Harris's Last Party book, which is like you buy. I mean, to anybody watching this, if you haven't got the Last Party by John Harris, you have to buy it, because it's basically the Britpop Bible. Is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
But it goes on, about Alistair Campbell and Tony Blair tried to get Damon involved, and Damon was like, no thanks, you can see what you're up to. And then they basically get Noel in and Ellis. But funny enough, I think in the book by Daniel Rachel, the Don't Look Back in Anger book, he's got quotes from John Major and Virginia Bottomley, and the Tory party that actually tried something similar. So around the mid-90s, earlier than obviously New Labour, etc., they tried to get people involved and try and make this Cool Britannia thing. And apparently the Cool Britannia thing was actually sort of a bit of a brainchild of the Conservative Party randomly, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But anyway, that's an aside. But I agree. The moment Noel Gallagher's in there shaking hands with Tony Blair, it's like, I'm not sure this isn't cool.
No. One of the interesting ones I did see was when, and I think you might have a comment, you did reply to this person, when Sleeper's She's a Good Girl crashed at number 7 after lots of Radio 1 airplay. I thought that was one I'd not seen, but I hadn't seen that before. That one say that before. I thought, well, that's a
So the was that I've been who was I can't remember. But yeah, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because they obviously push it really, really, really hard, going for trying to get a number 1 single, and they fall a bit short. I guess that happens a lot, really. I think you start to see where the singles are just not getting there anymore. I mean, I've made a note on my pad here about the fact that so Manson's 6 album only gets to number, funny enough, only gets to number 6 in the charts.
Oh, all right.
And that really should be going for the number 1 position, etc. Party Hard, the single by Pulp, only gets to 29.
Wow.
That's pretty poor. That's pretty poor, really. And a lot of people will talk about the Blur 13 album cycle as well. 1999. Is that the end of Britpop, etc.? No Distance Left to Run comes off that as a big single. It's to 14, and Blur are massive, and it gets to 14, and they're struggling at that point. Britpop's struggling really to get its numbers.
Yeah, them numbers say, the once was in the top 10s and now just not happening. Before
no.
Now, next one, Spice Girls, James. There was another comment that came up. I have written this one down by Craig Brown wrote, in June 1996, with the first Spice Girls single came out. That's 2 years before singing. That is way too early. There's lots of good music in between 96 and 98, and it's like.
So yeah, you get Wannabe, isn't it? It's Wannabe.
Yeah, it was Wannabe. Yeah.
Zigga Zigga and all that malarkey. Yeah, so that I think is the moment the pop producers and managers and labels, etc., are right. We've had enough of this. You lads with the guitars or whatever, you lot, get out of the way because we're back and we're the big boys around here. And yeah, and they throw a lot behind the Spice Girls, and they really go for it. As we all know, the Spice Girls go on to be absolutely massive.
They did, and it's funny you just mentioned that about pop and the PR people, because Martin Green, the DJ from Smashing in the 90s, he actually replied. I've spoken to him a couple of times on Instagram, and he wrote back to me and said he agreed that when the Spice Girls were the group that killed Britpop. He's in favour of Spice Girls, and he put it because suddenly the record companies realised they could have enormous instant success rather than spending years developing artists. They dropped the Brit in favour of the pop.
Yeah, that's probably true, isn't it? It's easier to quickly bang together a quick pop band. You literally put an advert out in the professional papers, wherever it is, however you do it, and you can put together a band like the Spice Girls, or take that as another example, isn't it? It's literally you just advertise, put it together. The song's already written by some bloke. You go and record it, bang, you got a single. You can have it out in a few weeks, and easy.
Boyzone and Spice Girls and all that running wild that time.
Exactly. So. And pop sells such massive numbers, doesn't it? It's frightening, the numbers. We think about Britpop as being quite a big thing in our lives, etc. But the numbers, you would not even comparable. Even Oasis would probably be struggling to hit the numbers that Spice Girls were hitting at points in the 90s. Absolutely crazy.
So let's call it then, James. Let's call it, we're going 92 with Pop Scene and 98 with Single Party Hard by Pulp. That's the timeline we're going with. And you say they've got to produce an album or at least a single within that timeline for us to consider them in there. Right. We're going to spin the wheel and see which band we're going to look at in the first episode next time, James. And we've decided what bands we're going to put on the wheel. So on the wheel right now, we've got Reef, Sleeper, These Animal Men, Manson, and probably the biggest band there, Oasis. Now, I'm going to give it a good couple of spins, but is there any band you would like to see come up first, James, out of them five? Any at all? Or have you no preference?
I don't really have a preference. I like all those bands, but These Animal Men would be quite interesting to talk about. They're quite an interesting band.
Yeah, I'm quite interested to see Reef. What would people have to say about Reef?
Yeah, Reef will cause a few discussions, I think.
Well, I did do a couple of practice spins earlier, and I got Oasis once, and I think I got Sleeper twice. So I'm hoping. I don't really want Oasis first, but right.
We're in the lap of the gods. We can't decide.
Here we go.
Oh, look at the colours. Oh.
There we go.
Manson.
So
we've talked a little bit about Manson already this evening, so we'll have plenty to cover on that, I think.
Yeah. So please, there's our first band for next episode, everybody. It's going to be Manson. Please leave any comments and look out for any posts on Twitter and Instagram, because I'm sure people have got plenty to say. Yes, like I was saying, please leave any comments about the episode down below. If you have any more comments about when you think the end and start of Britpop was, then please leave the video a thumbs up and look out on Twitter and Instagram for. I'll cut this bit down and put it as a post on both so people can see the band that have come up. And I just want to say thank you for James for joining me tonight. It's been a pleasure meeting you for the first time, and I can't wait to have more discussions with you, because I think it's going to be really exciting to discuss what people have got to say about every band that's coming up.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Yeah, lovely. Thanks, David. Yeah.
Nope. So I'll see you next time, James. Thank you for coming.
Cheers.